Well, this sure kicks off our week,
I was
doesn't
going
it?
to say, yeah, we have plenty to talk about today, that's for sure.
Julie and I worked on all this show prep all morning out the window. Thanks, Jamie. Good morning, everyone. This is big news, as you've heard. I want you to hear. I'm gonna let ABC News tell the beginning of this, but the Supreme Court has spoken. Steve Portnoy from ABC with the announcement and the ruling that former President Trump remains on the ballot in Colorado.
This case asked the justices to dig into the meaning and application of a constitutional clause that was written in 1866. And other than a recent case in New Mexico that involved a January 6th rioter, the 14th Amendment's disqualification clause really hasn't been invoked in over a century. Prior to this ruling, judges and officials in 3 states, Colorado, Maine, and most recently Illinois, had ruled that Donald Trump could not appear on the ballot because, having previously taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution, he then took part in an insurrection.
So that was a decision made outside of a courtroom. Former president, has not been convicted of any crime. Therefore, and this is the important part of this, the Supreme Court unanimously made this decision. So calling this a conservative right-wing court, all of those other things that were going to happen if this were a close decision, out the window. Even the most liberal justices on the court looking at this and saying this is an absolute abuse of the 14th Amendment. And this is where the problems lie. Go back to the Trump presidency, and I'll say this, I've been critical of President Trump for a number of things that he's done. And I really believe there are people that have Trump derangement syndrome, that they have such a seething hatred for him that they don't care what laws they throw out the window to get him. Just get him. That's all that matters. Just get him. And that's not the way our country is supposed to work. I don't care who you are. And in this case, if you go back to his presidency, they tried to warp the 25th Amendment. The 25th Amendment that would have but they were asking that the cabinet take away the powers of the presidency because at the time they said President Trump's mental state does not allow him to continue as president, which is ironic based on what we're going through now. And we're going to talk more about that later in the show. But here we have the former president of the United States during his presidency. If you look at what they were doing, Nancy Pelosi commissions orders two of the biggest committees in the House of Representatives, 4 years worth of investigation. She used the Judiciary Committee and Jerry Nadler, the Intelligence Committee and Adam Schiff, and for 4 years, we had Adam Schiff almost on a weekly basis saying that they had evidence that the president had broken the law, which they never produced. So 4 years of trying to get rid of him on a technicality. The 25th Amendment, which gives... It is a way, and the way it was written and what it was supposed to do, what it is supposed to do, is an unfortunate thing, but it's necessary. We have a line of secession in our country that if something were to happen to the president, God forbid, that the vice president takes on the presidency. After that, it's the Speaker of the House, and so on down the line. And that is in case, and it has happened, where presidents die or are killed in office. But we also had to have an amendment, or we had to have a way to deal with an incapacitated president. Meaning if a president becomes unable to do the job, and again, I don't wish this on anyone. If a president is in a coma, if a president is severely injured and can't communicate, but is still alive, if they cannot do the job of the presidency, that power can be removed from the president and given to the vice president. And then the president, I believe the time frame is 2 weeks. The president has time to show that they are capable of doing the job. If they do that, the power of the presidency is then restored to the president. As opposed to when the president has, let's say the president has a surgical procedure and he's going to be under anesthetic, where for temporarily the power is given to the vice president. When the president doesn't have the power to do that, that's where the 25th Amendment comes in. And they tried to use that to try to get rid of Donald Trump. Now, I will tell you, I'm glad that that's not happening to President Biden as much as, and we'll get into the numbers a little bit later on the show, the vast majority of American voters, over 70% of American voters, believe that he is too old to do another 4 years. Does that mean that we should be invoking amendments to get him tossed out of office? No, it should be done at the ballot box. Go and vote in November, vote your conscience, and vote for who you think is best. If the nation still believes that Joe Biden is going to be, and this is all due respect to Nikki Haley, she won the D.C. primary. We're going to talk about all this later on. But let's assume for a moment that both Donald Trump and Joe Biden are the two candidates. If those are your choices, if you believe, given those two choices, that Joe Biden is the best option for you, then vote for him. And if you think that Donald Trump is a better option, then vote for Donald Trump. But this technicality stuff, it's not the first time it's been done. We've gone through this laundry list of ways they try to find technicalities. When Barack Obama was elected president, they tried to find a technicality by saying he wasn't born here. And there were all of these investigations into his birth certificate that he had actually been born in another country, and they changed his birth certificate. And so even then I said to my party, and I was not happy that Barack Obama beat John McCain. I wasn't happy that he won a second term. From my political perspective, it's not what I wanted. I didn't think it was right for the country. But to try to find a technicality, it's like being a sports fan and your team loses and you spend the next year blaming it on the referees. Bad calls, I guess there are bad calls. We know that they happen. But if you are going to continue to find a technicality, we're going to find a technicality to get this person thrown out. And it's even worse because it's not saying we lost and we're moving on, but we're angry that we lost. In this case, we lost, and we're going to try to find a technicality to win. Now, we talk about, again, the stolen election. Everybody's on board with that. When you look at what the traditional media says, what people say about this, the election deniers are scoffed at. That's what happens. Now, I will tell you from personal experience, if you listen to the show where I stand, I don't believe the 2020 election was stolen. I don't believe 2022 was stolen. And I've said that to my party, to many people that disagree. But I will tell you that when you hear of the image of the election deniers being people that are just out of their minds, tinfoil hat wearers, I can tell you that there are people that I respect immensely that are very, very good people, smart people, proud, patriotic Americans that believe the election was stolen. So the narrative that everybody you disagree with is crazy is another one that's wrong. But the idea that you're going to find a technicality to remove someone from the ballot or remove someone from office is something that we need to stop doing, because it also takes away from the importance of an election. Joe Biden was elected president of the United States, and in my political opinion, we are suffering those consequences now. Now, there are those that believe he's doing a good job. I don't. But for the people that are on my side of the aisle, we have to stare that right in the face. We have to stare that in the face and say, why did our party lose that election? Now, outside of the election deniers, the people that believe it was stolen, you have to take a look at that and say, okay, what do we need to do to win next time? How do we win elections? And when the president of the United States exercises his rights in the way he builds his cabinet, when the president of the United States uses his executive orders over 80 times to reverse border policies, which we're going to talk about at 8:35, of how many people have been allowed into this country. 8 million, there's an 8 million person backlog of people trying to get in here awaiting asylum hearings. 8 million people under this administration. So again, that is, elections have consequences to me. As a nation, we have to face this. There are things that should be done. Presidential policy changes a lot of things, which is why the American people have to be much more careful in who they elect. The left would say the same thing. If I were on the other side of the aisle and I'm looking at the Trump train once again rolling down the tracks, you have to understand why the American people are looking at two candidates and saying the one on the other side of the aisle from you is a better option. That's the way you look at it. The idea that that Colorado and Maine, and I can't remember which other, there's one other state that have said, Illinois. I was going to say Indiana, but you're right, Julia, Illinois. Those states are trying to keep Trump off the ballot. That's out the window now. Trump will remain on the ballot. Now, can Nikki Haley wage this big comeback? I guess it's possible. She won the D.C. primary. Tomorrow is Super Tuesday. What happens after that? But in the end, the American people should make the decision. I know that sounds simplistic, but the Supreme Court, you think of another topic, think of another case to go before that's potentially going in front of or is in front of the Supreme Court that would get a unanimous decision. Name one. In your mind, name one. So this idea that you are going to find a technicality to throw the president or anybody off of a ballot or keep them from running a race. And what this does, and I will tell you again, it bolsters the narrative that Trump has been touting for a long time. I told you early on in the presidential campaign, early on in the Trump presidency, when all of these investigations were coming his way, the Mueller report and all these other things, if you remember, President Trump said, they're not after me. They're after you, and I'm just in their way. Drain the swamp. All of these things that are going on in a unanimous Supreme Court decision, it looks exactly like that narrative to many people. And I just think that people have got to start winning elections and stop making excuses. It's going back to the coaching days. Stop making excuses and go win. And that's what they're going to be forced to do now.
Thanks for watching the Mike Broomhead Show. Tap to watch the first season of Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast. You can also click the button in the middle to subscribe.